five Studebaker brothers founded the manufacturing company of the same name in 1852, essentially a continuation of the family business dating back to the colonial era in the U.S. and even earlier in Germany, making wagons, buggies, carriages, wheelbarrows, and much more, at their peak producing 75,000 horse-drawn vehicles annually. And starting in 1902, electric cars, after a couple years of providing bodies to other electric car manufacturers. And although the electric car models would be made for a decade, gas power models were added in 1904, built in conjunction with Garford. The cars initially had a 96-inch wheelbase and used a 15-horsepower horizontal twin, quickly moving to bigger cars with more powerful four-cylinder engines, with prices ranging from $3,700 to $5,000. But in 1911, Studebaker restructured, incorporated, took control of EMF, and ended their partnership with Garford. The EMF cars were already selling well, and Studebaker sent mechanics directly to customers to deal with complaints, improving their brand image. And in 1913, Studebaker introduced their first monoblock engine with the new six-cylinder designs. They would gain lucrative military contracts during the duration of World War I, leading to new rugged built-for-life models for 1918 on 112 and 120-inch wheelbases, with new sixes of 207 to 354 cubic inches, with up to 60 horsepower. And Studebaker would continue to be one of the top-selling brands. Then, in an effort to continue improving quality, they built the first controlled outdoor proving grounds in the U.S. A spin-off budget brand was created in 1927, named Erskine after the company president. Initially on a 108-inch wheelbase and powered by a cheaper Continental 6, it was priced under $1,000, but still twice as much as a Ford, which might explain the disappointing sales that never got much above $25,000 annually. New model names for Studebakers were also introduced, as the Dictator, Commander, and President. The last starting as a 75-horsepower premium version of the Big Six, but moving to a smoother 100-horsepower, 313 cubic inch straight 8 for 1928. Studebaker took control of Pierce Arrow, helping move the President further up market, bumping it to a 109-horsepower 337 for 1929, with even the base Dictator getting an available 3.6-liter 221 cubic inch V8 with 68 horsepower. The Erskine was canceled after 1930, but Studebaker itself was still fourth in overall sales, and would soon try again with an entry-level brand, this time named for Notre Dame football coach Knute Rockne. And then they would take ownership of White, which controlled 10% of the truck market, both light and commercial. But by 1933, sales had dropped to 1/10 of what they were in 1930, and Studebaker was in receivership. Pierce Arrow and White were sold off, and Rockne was canceled, and new Land Cruiser Streamline models were introduced. With prices now well below $800, Studebaker climbed back into the top 10 in sales. The mid-range Commander was dropped in 1935, but the entry-level Dictator name was seeing some negative press in some export markets, so 1937 would be its last year, taking over the Commander name the following year. And Studebaker would move into the truck market, first with the Express Coupe, followed by the range of M-Series trucks. 1939 would see a new, even lower-priced entry-level model as the Champion. Starting at just over $650, it was 189 inches long on a 110-inch wheelbase and weighed around 2,300 pounds, compared to the 117 and 122-inch wheelbases of the bigger models. The 2.7-liter, 167 cubic inch straight 6 was rated at 78 horsepower, and Studebaker claimed 27 miles per gallon, when the V8 President had 100 horsepower. Updates for 1941 included so-called hidden running boards, meaning inside the car. And the following year, when production was stopped for the Second World War, Studebaker manufactured cargo trucks, the semi-amphibious Weasel tracked vehicle, and aircraft components for the likes of the B-17. When car production returned in 1946, it was with a continuation of the pre-war Champion. But 1947 models had all new styling, prompting the first by far with a post-war car slogan, and included a unique Starlight coupe with a wraparound rear window. Offered as the 112-inch wheelbase Champion, 119-inch wheelbase Commander or a 123-inch wheelbase Land Cruiser. Prices started around $1,400, and the straight six came in either 170 cubic inch with 80 horsepower or 226 cubic inch with 94 horsepower, with the bigger engine increasing to 246 cubic inches and 100 horsepower for 1949. The facelift for 1950 was somewhat controversial, with its so-called bullet nose, but Studebaker had record sales exceeding 320,000 in the U.S. And then in celebration of 100 years of business, there was a new V8 for 1952, initially 223 cubic inches, producing 120 horsepower. The restyle of 1953 wasn't terribly radical for the most part, the exception being the coupe, which was very sleek for the time, being nearly 5 inches lower than the two-door sedan. The cars came on either 117 or 121-inch wheelbase, and prices started around $1,700. Although sales remained relatively strong at over 150,000, Studebaker would soon fall out of the top 10, and a price war between GM and Ford would cut into the already slim profit margins as the company went into debt, leading to a merger with Packard and a planned merger with AMC that would fall through. Initially, changes were minimal, although the V8 got bigger for 1955 to 259 cubic inches and 185 horsepower, and the President returned as the top trim model. Things would be revised for 1956, with the sleek Lowy coupe restyled as the new sporty Hawk. Starting at $3,100, it was easily $500 more than the top President Classic sedan. In top form, it was called the Golden Hawk and used a Packard 352 V8 with 275 horsepower for a mid-15-second quarter mile and a top speed near 130. Quite the performer for the time. The standard models were restyled to have a more conservative design, and the Studebaker V8 increased to a 289 with up to 225 horsepower. For 1957, the Golden Hawk switched to the Studebaker V8 with a supercharger for the same 275 horsepower and similar performance. And the Studebaker line of cars would also become the Packard line of cars, as the standard Clipper and its own version of the Hawk. The 1958 models moved to quad headlights, as was the expectation for the year, but the struggling company needed a new direction, while Packard was discontinued and replaced at dealerships by imported Mercedes-Benz. So the all-new standard models for 1959 were smaller with cost-cutting in mind, and a starting price below $2,000, 175 to 179 inches long on a 109 or 113-inch wheelbase. And still available with the 259 V8, it wasn't exactly a compact, but it was viewed as one. And the facelift of 1961 had the Lark looking more like the Mercedes it was being sold beside, a look the restyled 1962 models would carry on with. And the Hawk would also get more formal, updated styling that year to become the Gran Turismo Hawk. And although it continued to be sold through 1964, it was effectively replaced in 1963 by the new Avanti. Marketed as a personal coupe, it was 192 inches long on a 109-inch wheelbase, and with its supercharged variants, such as the R2, would set numerous land speed records. And the R2 package would carry into the Lark as well. With 289 horsepower, it was a 15-second car capable of nearly 125 miles an hour, and the rarer R3 and R4 were even faster. And another feature introduced for the year was the retractable top of the new Lark Wagon Air station wagon that carried over to the restyled models of 1964, making the look much more in line with the rest of the American market. But sales were disappointing, falling to 40,000 for the year, so the U.S. factory was closed. Tooling for the Avanti and pickup were sold off to become separate companies of their own, as Avanti II and Studebaker Truck Parts, and Studebaker made an attempt to withdraw into the Canadian market, thinking 20,000 in annual sales would be enough to survive. But not having funds for development of new models, there were talks to import the Nissan Cedric or Toyota Century as the new Studebaker. But after that fell through, and they failed to meet their sales goals, Studebaker closed their doors in 1966, although the Avanti would remain in limited production independently another 40 years, until 2006. And as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below. and like and subscribe.